The first punch was never meant for him, yet it changed everything. A homeless biker's son stepped between a disabled kid and a crowd that had already decided who didn't belong, and by the time the bell rang, his future was torn away. He was expelled before sunset, his name smeared across the hallway walls as trouble. But as night fell and engines began to rumble miles away, something far bigger was already moving toward the school, and no one knew whether it would bring justice or ruin. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for those who cannot stand alone, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Only Kindness. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Rowan Hale had grown up counting road lines instead of birthdays. His father, Micah Torres, slept beneath overpasses and rode with a brotherhood that the world feared before it understood. Rowan learned early that hunger could be quiet and shame could be loud, and that the wrong jacket could close doors before he ever touched the handle. At 17, he walked into Northbridge High wearing boots too worn and a backpack too light, carrying the weight of a reputation he never chose. He stayed invisible on purpose, kept his head down, and studied hard enough to outrun the rumors that followed his last name. Evan Lorne did not have that luxury. His legs didn't work the way other kids' legs did, and the braces he wore made every step a slow announcement. The hallways were cruel places, and teachers were tired, and cruelty often hid behind laughter that sounded like normal noise. Rowan noticed because he had learned to read rooms the way his father read weather. He saw the way bodies formed a wall, the way eyes sharpened, the way a joke turned into a shove. When the moment came, he didn't plan to be brave. He simply stepped forward, placed himself between the storm and the smallest boat, and refused to move. The punishment came faster than understanding ever does. Administrators saw a fight, not a shield. They saw a boy with a biker name and decided the ending before the story had time to breathe. Rowan was escorted out with a paper in his hand and a locker emptied into a box. Evan watched from the end of the hall, helpless and shaking, while whispers spread like oil on water. Outside, the day was cold and bright, and Rowan sat on the curb staring at his boots, wondering how defending someone could feel so much like losing everything. He didn't call his father to complain. Micah already carried enough. Instead, Rowan walked a long way to the shelter, past the places where his father used to tune engines and trade favors for meals. The city felt louder without walls to hold him, and every sound reminded him that tomorrow had become a question mark. At the shelter, Micah listened anyway, his face still, his hands steady, his eyes older than the miles behind them. He didn't promise revenge. He didn't curse the school. He did what he had always done best, which was make a quiet decision and start a chain of events that could not be easily stopped. Word traveled the way it always did, not through phones but through people who knew the road. By dusk, jackets were being pulled from closets and engines were being checked. Not for violence, but for presence. For witness. For a line drawn not with fists but with numbers and calm. When the night air cooled and the moon climbed, a convoy began to roll, not toward chaos, but toward a building that had mistaken silence for guilt. At Northbridge High, the custodian was locking doors when the sound arrived, low at first, then layered, then undeniable. Headlights swept the parking lot like a tide, and bikes lined up in patient rows. 190 riders dismounted without shouting, without threats, without a single raised hand. They stood, a wall of leather and stillness, as parents gathered and teachers froze and cameras appeared from nowhere. Micah stepped forward, not as a leader demanding anything, but as a father carrying facts. He spoke of a boy who protected another boy. He spoke of how fear can make institutions lazy. He spoke of how accountability works both ways. Inside, the principal listened as the story unfolded without heat. Witnesses were invited. Security footage was reviewed. Evan's medical reports were acknowledged, and his parents stood taller than they had all year. The narrative cracked, then broke, and the truth fell through. By midnight, an emergency meeting had rewritten the afternoon. The expulsion was reversed. A public apology was drafted. Policies were promised, and oversight scheduled, and consequences assigned to those who had turned away when it mattered most. Rowan didn't feel victorious. He felt tired, and relieved, and strangely hopeful. The next morning, he returned to school not as a symbol but as a student. Evan rolled beside him, braces gleaming like small armor, and the hallways felt different, not kinder yet, but awake. Teachers made eye contact. Students whispered less. The building remembered the sound of engines and learned what presence could mean when it chose to show up for the right reasons. Near the end of this story, if it touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Only Kindness. Stories like this travel farther when you carry them. Rowan graduated months later with a letter in his pocket and a future that finally looked like more than survival. Micah watched from the back row, helmet tucked under his arm, pride quiet and complete. The road would always call, but now it didn't sound like escape. It sounded like choice.